This is the Late Round Podcast with your host, JJ Zacharisa.
What's up, everyone? It's JJ Zacharisa, and this is episode 670 of the Late Round Fantasy Football Podcast, sponsored by FanDuel. Thanks for tuning in. Each Wednesday during the season, you'll get this 10 Trends episode. It's where I talk about 10 statistical nuggets related to different things happening across the league. It's a quicker show than the others that I do each week, but it should hopefully be helpful as you navigate things in season. The trends this week are from last season and beyond because we haven't had any games played yet. But before getting into those trends, I want to remind you that the Week 1 NFL Sunday Million is officially live on FanDuel. Showcase your NFL knowledge and construct your best 9-player roster while staying under the salary cap. Then follow along using FanDuel's live scoring feature to compete for your share of $3 million in cash prizes, including a cool $1 million first place prize. And it's all for just $4. So head to FanDuel and submit your lineups today. Eligibility restrictions apply. Go to FanDuel.com or download the FanDuel app for more details. Trend 1 this week is that the Baltimore Ravens ran 69.7 plays per game last year, which was the 11th highest total of any team since 2011. Of the 50 teams who have run 67 plays per game that have next season data, so that's almost 3 fewer plays than where the Ravens were last year, 44 of the 50 ran fewer plays the following season. The Ravens were 23rd in pass rate last year, but they ranked 9th in pass attempts. And it's because of this. They ran so many plays. So when you're projecting Ravens pass catchers, keep this in mind. Don't just automatically transfer their target totals from one season to the next. The second trend this week is that Justin Fields finished as a weekly top 12 quarterback, a QB1, in each of his final 4 completed starts for Chicago last year. So we're not counting the game against Baltimore where he got hurt. He averaged 19.7 points per game from week 8 onward. Again, not counting the game that he got hurt in, which from week 8 on was the QB7 in fantasy football. This all happened when the Bears started to unleash him a little bit more on the ground while changing play calling duties. I wrote him up in my draft guide as a player to target, but don't sleep on Justin Fields' dual threat ability this year. Since 2011, we've seen one teammate pairing of running backs rank in the top 12 together in PPR points per game with a minimum of 8 games played. That happened in 2017 when Alvin Kamara and Mark Ingram finished top 8 together in points per game at the position. So we've averaged 0.1 running back teammates finishing together as top 12 options per season over the last decade or so. When looking at the top 24 running backs in PPR points per game, we've averaged 1.3 teammate pairings per season. So substantially more. That's where I think we could see A.J. Dillon and Aaron Jones this year. It'll probably take a lot for them to be in the top 12 together, though I do think that they're set up for that possibility. And I think that we could see multiple teammate pairings get to the top 24. Tony Pollard and Ezekiel Elliott are candidates, but even teams like New England with Ramondre Stevenson and Damian Harris, it's at least possible. But it's not a very common occurrence. Keep in mind that if the Packers do end up producing 2 top 12 running backs, they'd only be the second team to do that since 2011. And it might be further. I just didn't look further than 2011. Now, after that trend, you're probably sitting there wondering about wide receivers. So I'll make trend 4 this week about wide receiver teammates. Because we've got a lot of teams this year with 2 really good wide receivers, especially by ADP. Historically, wide receiver teammates do a lot better than running back teammates do. Since 2011, we've averaged 1.6 wide receiver teammate pairings, finishing in the top 12 together in PPR points per game. Again, that's with a minimum of 8 games played. Over the last 2 seasons, we've seen 2 pairings each season. When it comes to top 24 pairings, we've averaged 4.3 per season. So it's a pretty dramatic difference compared to running backs. Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill can still both be plenty fantasy relevant based on history. And number 2 wide receivers who get drafted in the middle rounds, they can still be relevant in the right environment. And that makes sense, right? Teams usually only have 1 running back on the field. So that limits the potential for other running backs on that team to score. At wide receiver, plenty of guys are seeing work all game long. So that allows more to score fantasy points. Last year's rookie wide receiver class was really good. And I don't think people give it enough love. We've had 102 rookie wide receiver seasons where the wide receiver saw 50 or more targets. That's since 2011. So we're already filtering this out to include good players. Getting targeted is a skill. And if a rookie wide receiver is seeing 50 or more targets, that means he's doing a good job. But of those 102, 2 wide receivers from last year's class ranked in the top 8 in yards per route run as rookies. 6 of them were in the top 35. And then a 7th one, Rondell Moore, ranked 42nd. And those numbers don't even include Rashad Bateman, who could be in store for a monster season in 2022. I'm ready for us to look back on this class and say that it was one of the best classes that we've seen over the last 10 or so years. Probably not the best, but at least in the top 3. In 2021, Najee Harris led all running backs in running back rush share, which is the percentage of team running back rushes. He had an 85.5% share. That was over 8 percentage points higher than Jonathan Taylor and Joe Mixon. Those guys ranked 2nd and 3rd. With that being said, if you look at running back rush share per game played, Harris ranks 3rd. Derrick Henry averaged almost a 95% running back rush share per game last year, ranking 1st. And in 2nd, Elijah Mitchell. He was at 87.1%. I'm bringing this up mostly for information sharing, but it's usually tough to maintain super high numbers within any statistic, within any volume statistic. So I'd expect those players to dip a little bit in 2022, at least Henry, Mitchell, and Harris. Christian McCaffrey has played 10 games over the last 2 seasons. It's why some are afraid to draft him. But there's no denying that he has the highest upside of any player in fantasy football, including Jonathan Taylor. McCaffrey actually played 8 of those games without a big injury that sidelined him for a large chunk of a game. So we'll look at an 8-game sample here. His last 8 games of being healthy, essentially. In those games, he averaged a little over 26 PPR points per game. How good is 26? Well, as you know, Jonathan Taylor was last year's RB1. He's now the RB1 in fantasy drafts this year. Taylor averaged 21.9 PPR points per game last year. So over 4 points per game away from CMC's average over his last 8 healthy games. Don't forget that Christian McCaffrey breaks fantasy football when he's healthy. Over the last 2 seasons, Tampa Bay has led the NFL in pass attempts. That's not a surprise. They have 1,357 pass attempts over the last 2 seasons. The team in second isn't the Chiefs or the Chargers or the Cowboys or the Bills. It's the Steelers. I think we're bound to see a pretty big shift in offensive philosophy for Pittsburgh this year without Ben Roethlisberger. It's something that I've talked about all offseason. So keep that in mind when you're analyzing the pass-catching situation there. Trend 9 this week is that the New York Giants, with Jason Garrett as offensive coordinator for a lot of the last 2 seasons, they've had back-to-back seasons with the lowest touchdowns per game mark in the league. Like, you almost have to be trying to do that to achieve it. Part of the reason I've been bullish on Giants players this offseason is because it's almost impossible for them to be worse offensively than they've been the last 2 seasons. Even if Brian Daboll isn't the answer, he's a better answer than the staff that they just had, because it's hard not to be. The last trend this week, it's a pretty straightforward one. Kyle Shanahan joined the 49ers in 2017. In his 5 seasons as head coach, the 49ers have had 5 different lead running back rushers for the season. 2017 was Carlos Hyde, 2018 Matt Breida, then Raheem Mostert, then Jeff Wilson, and then Elijah Mitchell. Injuries played some role here, so I don't think he's actively choosing to throw another running back in the backfield each year just for fun. But we've seen time and time again Kyle Shanahan being very open-minded about his backfield. He uses players out of nowhere all the time, and that's something to always keep in mind. That's it for today's show, though. Thanks to all of you for listening. If you've yet subscribed to the Late Round Fantasy Football Podcast, make sure you are by searching for it pretty much anywhere podcasts can be found. And don't forget to follow me on Twitter at LateRoundQB. Remember to check out the Late Round Fantasy Football Patreon, which you can find on LateRound.com. I'm doing weekly rankings, rest of season rankings, live stream Q&As, and much more over there each week. But I appreciate everyone listening. I'll be back tomorrow with the weekly Sleeper Show.